on the agenda is the approval of the October 22nd, 2025 Policy Committee meetings. Do I have a motion?
I have to make some, I'll make a motion, but I have a couple corrections.
Oh, you make corrections first, okay.
So I emailed these in, but Mr. Bolivis asked me to make them publicly.
Okay.
So Mr. Brem, one of the public speakers, his name is misspelled.
Oh, okay.
It was Brem, it should be B-R-E-H-M. And there's a missing F in front of the word should be field under policy 443, second paragraph, fourth line. So, but I already emailed those in, so I think they've already been corrected in the official record, but just
Okay.
now for here.
So a motion with those edits?
With those edits.
All right, a second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor? That's unanimous. All right, we'll move on to 1.3, which is public comment, and we do have one public commenter, Ms. Allison Rizzo. And you have 2 minutes.
So much better.
Good.
Good morning. Good morning. Allison Rizzo from Frederick, parent of 3 girls who are enrolled in Frederick County Public Schools. High school students of my faith attend early morning seminary class every day before school. They start the day in prayer and scripture study, relating what they experience in everyday modern life with the principles that are foundational to our worship of God. These positive lessons help them have a strong foundation of faith and help to ground them in their study. The lessons encourage them to have confidence as they practice their faith throughout the day. I just so happened to teach this class this morning, and the lesson happened to be about our beliefs about the divine purpose of government and about freedom of expression of our religion. So I'd like to share with you 2 articles that we follow in our faith as sound principles of the practice of our religion that relate to your discussion today. Now, these were written in the 1830s, before there was a strong test of the First Amendment of our Constitution, and while members of our faith were being violently persecuted here in the United States. The first is, we believe in being subject to kings, presidents, rulers, and magistrates in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law. The other is, we claim the privilege of worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience and allow all men the same privilege. Let them worship how, where, or what they may. These 2 principles can work well together, and we need to educate children about how they do. Many youth today feel as though they are in a minority, as if it is odd to talk about religion with friends or in public spaces. Just yesterday, my 10-year-old daughter was praying before she ate lunch. A good friend of hers noticed something and had the courage to ask her what she was doing. It sounds like it led to a very good conversation where they got to know one another better, between a child who prays to God regularly and a child who states that she is an atheist. We can all get along. We can all have unity as a community and as citizens in this great country. We need schools to be welcoming and affirming to students of faith, where every child feels comfortable to express his or her personal views and practice religion, where every adult can be free to teach religion as part of a worldview, as a study of history and philosophy, and where every person can privately practice their own religious expression according to their own conscience. I wonder if all students and staff understand your policy. Thank you for thinking deeply about the importance of your policy on religious expression. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to 1.4, Policy 413, Family and Community Partnerships.
For those of you following along, the marked up copy starts on packet page 16. This is the second time that Family and Community Partnership has been presented to the Policy Committee. It was previously discussed on January 22nd, 2025. As a reminder, this policy was adopted in November of 2006 and last revised in September of 2020. The discussion in January really focused on incorporating accountability mechanisms and vetting requirements, adding definitions as needed, making sure to recognize the importance of our partnership with the Parent-Teacher Association, the Parent-Teacher Organization, the Parent-Teacher Student Association. And then we had a robust discussion about, do we even want this policy in the way it currently exists, or do we want to split it into a business partnerships policy and a second policy on family and community engagement, which you can see is the route that staff have taken. So the proposed edits for 413 are to retitle the policy to recognize that split, so it will no longer be family-community partnership. It will be parent, family, and community engagement. The idea being we want to pull that partnership piece out to create that distinction between our actual systemic partners and the small p partnerships we have with our families. We've added 5 definitions. We've added 5 definitions to the policy to help understand the content that follows. We've revised the policy statement to recognize the role that families and community members play in our education system and the importance of two-way communication, shared responsibility, etc. The implementation section acknowledges the many ways that individuals can participate or visit our schools and sets expectations from the board for each group. So our visitors, we expect our visitors, whoever you may be, whatever reason you might be showing up, we expect you to behave in an appropriate manner. Our volunteers, we expect you to be trained in accordance with our regulations on training for volunteers. We expect our families to participate. We want their participation in our students' education, and the board encourages that in ways to ensure that families are participating at the school level. Involve them in the decisions on school committees and other school-based decision-making bodies. Involve them by offering resources and trainings and workshops to help them support their children when they have to continue the education work outside of the school building. Broader than just families, we also have a section addressing the board's expectation for community member participation and saying, we know that our community members are just as much a part of our education team as the families and volunteers are. And then lastly, we have a section that directs the superintendent to implement regulations, establishing guidelines and procedures to make this policy work. The recommendation is to approve this as is to advance to the board for a first reading.
Comments?
I just have a question, and this is just because this situation's come up for us in the past. Going back to the definitions and then the word chaperone and community member. A member of the community ages 21 and older. So for example, you have a prom, and you have someone that signs up to chaperone the prom who happens to be a 22-year-old girlfriend of your 18-year-old senior that's attending. And they're a community member and they want to chaperone. Obviously, that can be kind of sticky. So I don't know if where that needs to be addressed, but do you know what I mean? Like that just has we want people to come in, and that's my primary role in my schools is getting people to be engaged. Please come and be engaged. But we want, at that point, it becomes kind of is it a chaperone situation? It's probably not, but we're gonna, do you know what I mean?
I think that's an issue to be addressed at the school level by the principal.
Yes.
And when this principal is vetting who is going to be selected to be the chaperone, if it's a 22-year-old young lady whose boyfriend is 18 and a senior at the high school, there's nothing illegal about that, but it's
probably not a great chaperone.
But probably not a great
Yes, that out there.
Right. That's what I
Pick that word in my head.
That's what I heard Celeste
But
was saying. It's like,
that's the decision for the principal. That's not a policy decision to be made.
Okay.
And I don't think this is intended to govern chaperones. We have a separate.
No, that was just a example of, bringing people into our schools and into our activities on or off campuses and making sure that they're all, I've dealt with more than one sticky situation, so I'm kind of, let's make sure, but I understand what we do want community involvement too, and I think that's great.
I have a question. Does this particular policy relate to any of our strategies or strategic initiatives? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. A couple of things that I would just highlight that are sort of running in a parallel track. Dr. Loris Phillips and the public affairs team oversees all of our visitor and volunteers. And one of the upgrades that we made a couple of years ago, I think it feels like a couple of years ago, I don't know if it was just 1 year, two, was to bring a increased rigor and standard to who can come in and work with our kids. And so now we require all of our volunteers to be background checked, fingerprinted if they're regular. Visitors, they all run through our Raptor system like anybody else. But that's been a significant lift for that team and for that body of work. And I don't know, Dr. Loris Phillips, if you want to speak to that and sort of how this policy is going to help support some of the additional work that we're trying to do in that area.
Yeah, so one of the things we're working on now, as soon as this is approved by the board, we'll look at our regulation as far as how we're, the details pertaining to chaperones, volunteers, visitors, and the criteria for each to make sure that our volunteers, especially, and our chaperones have the training that they need to know you all's expectations as far as policy, ours regarding regulation, and what's expected of them when they're supporting our students. But it does fit very nicely with our strategic goals in the school system as far as community engagement, student safety, and staff safety, because we're inviting individuals who are not employed by FCPS in this regard into our schools to support us. So it ties very closely with our strategic plans and goals as a school system.
And you know, this really, because I do some of this work in my full-time job, there was something that was brought forward, and I never thought about it in this context
Oh, what's that?
before, about mapping policy with strategic goals. You know, like if we, and I'm not saying that we start this now, but I think it would be good in the future that the community understands, like this does map. Not all policies are gonna do that, but
I
if
mean, they
it
should.
does.
They should.
Should. I mean, this is student and staff experience, it's well-being, I mean, it's all of those things.
Yeah,
Alan, to your point, goal 4, stakeholder engagement, this is a big piece of that. But
Right.
if you look at goal 1, culture of achievement, that this is helping our students to be able to achieve in various ways
Exactly.
as well.
so I don't know if we wanna speak to that in the regulation, or maybe I don't know if you
What
speak
I-
to it in the policy.
What I might suggest is in our analysis form that we create, where we ask all these questions, we can add an item to that. What strategic goal does this policy support?
That might be the best.
I would
way
even
forward.
add to that, I love this idea, I would even add to that, maybe adding a line in E, related information. If we just added a line that said, meets FCPS strategic goal
So the only,
2 and 4.
the only challenge with that is that strategic plans and goals change.
Right.
You don't want your policies to be
Well, if
down
we're
to
limited
language
to
that might change, that's my only.
We're just providing a link to the strategic plan,
And you're not saying which.
under related, yeah.
Oh,
You're not saying
okay.
Under
which
related
one.
information.
Related
So
Just the
that-
whole
So that
strategic plan.
it acknowledges that
Yes.
we're looking at the strategic
Okay.
plan as part of
He's saying as an FCPS resource, like you have all these other resources here.
all those resources. I'm just saying, would it be appropriate to include a link to the FCPS strategic plan?
So I think the challenge remains that if that strategic plan changes,
static.
it's,
But if all you're providing is a link to the
To the
strategic
whole
plan.
plan. He's not
Whether it's
saying.
not saying
understand that,
this
but-
meets goal 1 or 2,
That
we're
link
just
could be a
saying,
dead link in a year.
Yeah.
That's the issue. It could be a
Right,
dead
so-
link in a year.
that,
wouldn't the strategic plan link always be live?
well, no, but so
Not that
if the
big,
strategic
just
plan
URL.
takes a dramatic shift, and the policy then doesn't align, so let's say the policy aligns with strategic goal 1, and not 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm not saying this specific.
No,
And we put something in that says aligns to strategic goal, and then it no longer aligns with 1 because 1 gets swept away and is replaced with a new with 6. Then this doesn't necessarily, like, I think without the context of what strategic goal it's aligning to,
Okay.
I think that may create some confusion where someone's gonna
we can put it in our
In the cover page.
cover page.
I think, with an explanation of this ties to the strategic goal of community.
Brainstorming there, I thought, I just, because I like it more, it says, I like that idea, I like the public to recognize that we're staying focused on.
And if this is a big,
On the what's submitted to Granicus,
yes, it does. When you submit things to, when we put the cover page for board
Yes.
docs, or, well, whatever, Granicus, we indicate what strategic goal it's connected to. So when this gets in the public record, it's there as well,
Okay.
which I think is what you're after.
Yeah.
Here it is, right?
Yeah.
On the
Yeah,
cover.
we list it always on the cover
There we
page.
go.
Yeah,
Okay.
I knew it was on
That was
the
Yeah.
regular one,
Yeah.
yeah, there we go.
Okay,
hopefully that satisfies it.
Oh, there you go.
Yes,
See?
very good.
Okay, so it's not really needed within the policy itself, or there,
Yeah.
and I think where I was going was to have this as a statement somewhere within the policy.
Yeah.
But if this cover page though isn't available when the public pulls it up though on the website, correct?
The policy?
Only if they're reviewing the board documents.
Right.
Right, only if they're in the
Not when
board
they're
document.
doing
That was a
Not
big
necessarily
picture,
if
yeah, I mean, I think if
they're
that was a big picture interest, and I wouldn't want to speak for Mr. Blivis or his team, we would have to come up with some sort of a systemic roadmap that mapped every policy and reg to a strategic goal.
It's, when you go to the agenda packet,
And
page,
she's talking about just when you click on the policy on our policies webpage.
oh, I thought you were
You know
looking.
what I'm saying? You know, you can
She's
go
saying, like,
in,
it
you can
doesn't
search
live
for a
somewhere else.
policy and
Yeah.
it'll pull up, but
Right.
it doesn't,
Yeah,
yeah.
and the question is like, is the view worth the cost of that effort? Right.
Sure,
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I
yeah,
think it could be
I'm
an
not sure.
interesting project for someone.
I mean, I don't, and I'm
Well-
not asking for it to be implemented today.
I looked at it like, when someone has some downtime, that sounds like an interesting
Yeah.
project, but
That would be
Sure.
nobody.
yeah, that would be nobody.
That would be nobody.
Well, what would be interesting is that just when you go into the webpage and you do the drop down from Board of Education and you go to policies and strategic plan, policies, when you go to that policy and regulation information main screen, I'll just read that quick paragraph. The Board of Education sets policy not otherwise controlled by the state and federal laws, regulations set by the superintendent, define the procedures by which the board policy is carried out within the school system. It'd be interesting if we just added a sentence there that says, and aligns with FCPS strategic plan. Then it's just on the facing
Well,
page,
I'd say that's a pretty easy ad, but. I would have to refer to-
not in IT, so.
We've talked about wanting to do a wholesale revamp of the policy page, not where not the app in which the policies live, but the landing page where
Yes,
people go.
that's what I'm looking at.
where it says policy and regulation information.
Yeah.
We've talked about wanting to do more with that, and I know that Ms. Chesney and the public affairs team are working on developing something, so we can certainly incorporate that. And
Just plant that seed that let's see if we can't put in a sentence that said aligns with FCPS strategic plan in.
And then at that point, would it be appropriate to have a link to the strategic goals? And because I would think on the website, you guys are looking at that pretty on a regular basis and updating links and doing those fixes.
Yep.
So our strategic goals, so, and please forgive me for this question, is every 3 years, every 5 years?
Well, it's an interesting question. So there was, when Dr. Dyson and I joined FTPS in 2022, they had what were called aspirational goals. That was what the board had, but there wasn't actually a plan that went with it. So we created a plan across the cabinet and across the organization that we launched in 2023. We've done the state of the school. Dr. Loris Phillips and his team support that. That is sort of an annual report on the strategic plan for the last 2 years. But we're actually in the process of revising the strategic plan 2.0, if you will. And so we're going through that. So what you see on the website now, we're currently in a 6 to 8 month project to revamp the strategic plan, have it be more representative of all the work across the organization, because there were some. You know, those plans tend to be highly focused on the academic side of the house, which is of course our core purpose, right? But there are other aspects, and we're all interconnected, and we're really talking about, to your question, like what's the interconnection between what public affairs does to support our college and career readiness, or what legal services does, and all of those pieces. So we're sort of working through a 6 month plan to do that. Dr. Vetter is helping me lead that work, and we expect to have a new enhanced strategic plan 2.0 that we share along with the system in July.
Okay, and then what's the map for that? Is that like a 3-year projection?
We haven't done it that way,
Yeah.
which I think strategic planning is so interesting, right? Because you swing back and forth between long-range goals and then like, what am I going to
Right.
focus on right now in this year?
Correct.
So we actually, the previous plan we had mapped out over 8 years, I think was our initial iteration of it. And we found that it became too sort of ambiguous for people. So we said, okay, take that strategic plan, leave that, but really break it down into what do you want to do this year? Where's trying to do it sort of 1 year at a time and focus on big, really core work that we can, instead of making it, sort of spread out, it's much more deep and focused. And so we're asking each of the departments to say, like, what are your top 3 things you're working on this year? So it's got a long-range commitment to it, but the idea is that the system goals are not changed, but what we're working on to get to those goals is going to be sort of recursive, and we're going to sort of keep at it. Every year it's like a little something, right?
This approach gives us a lot more flexibility.
Yeah.
To say for the next 5 years, here's what we're going to do, and then all of a sudden, a new version of the blueprint comes down from the legislature, and we have to make a massive pivot. This approach gives us a lot more flexibility to adjust that plan as the world transpires around us.
It's, I know strategic planning is a heavy lift, and that's why I was like, if you're doing it every year, kudos to you, because it is a lot of work.
We're at least revisiting it every year. I think we have a responsibility to do an annual report. So we do an annual report every year, no matter whether it was a 3-year plan, an 8-year plan. We have to sort of, because sometimes you find that things change.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for us, with the best of intentions, we're sometimes told what our strategic goals have to be in a particular cycle.
Yeah.
Right? And so,
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Thank you, guys.
No, good discussion.
For,
Yep. Okay, so if we're, I'm sorry, I have one addition. Would it be possible under D implementation 1 to add, I don't know how you want to word it, participation on board committees? Sure. Because a vast number of our board committees include community members.
Absolutely. And we do have the cross-reference to organization of the board, which lists all of the committees that you all run. So yeah, we could certainly add that to D1.
Okay.
All I have to say on this is, that's a good discussion, good call, is I like the separation. Even though we talk about working in partnership with our parents, as a classroom teacher, you know how important that is. I think the word was good to take out, because when you think of partnerships, you think of those organizations and things. So and engagement is a good thing, because that's exactly what we're trying to do, is engage them in the schools.
So we need a motion.
Good. We have a motion to
I'll
move
move
this
that
forward
we-
we're moving it forward to first reading, right?
We would be moving this forward to
We
first
have a
reading.
motion to move this
Okay.
forward to first reading?
I will move it for first reading with the board.
Okay.
second.
All right, all those in favor? Very good. All right, thank you very much. All right. Policy 412, partnerships.
So policy 412 partnerships is in your packet if you're following along on page 25. This is a new policy, so there is no marked up copy. So you'll only see a clean version. This policy is intended to address what we took out of 413, and that is the partnerships piece. It has a relatively simple policy purpose statement, 3 definitions: partner, partnership, and partnership agreement. A two-part policy statement that there are expectations that the partnerships align with our mission, strategic plans, school improvement plans, and are intended to support student success and educational equity, and that we have a commitment to fostering a culture of engagement. The implementation recognizes 2 different types of partnerships: community and business. Community meaning our government partners, our community agencies, the nonprofits in our community, and businesses meaning, well, businesses. The implementation is very simple. Other than that, it just directs us to create a regulation and to report annually to the board on how the implementation of this policy and the partnership program is proceeding. Within the regulation, once it's developed, you will see language that helps explain the difference between a systemic partner versus a school partner, a formal partner versus an informal partner. You know, we had worked through all of that, and we had that actually in an earlier draft of this, and we came to the conclusion that that really belongs in regulation, not in policy. So we saved the language. We didn't just strike it and delete it, but we will be incorporating that into the regulation that will come along once this is ready for publication. the recommendation is to approve it as is to advance to the board for a first reading. And before I turn it over to you all for any questions or comments, yesterday, I want to share, yesterday we had a meeting, it was basically the superintendent and all of cabinet with some of our community partners and some of our business partners. It was a discussion session, and we're going to do this again in the spring. And actually, Dr. Loris Phillips, do you want to kind of explain a little bit more and kind of frame it so they understand? Because I don't feel like I'm doing it.
That was the scope, that was the scope.
You did a pretty good job of introing
The
that.
scope, right, the scope meeting?
Scope, yes. And some of you may recall, several years ago, we had the superintendent's business breakfast. And so that was the impetus behind this revamping of that. This is an opportunity for various nonprofits. Mr. Blivis said some of our government agencies and officials were there yesterday as well, along with businesses within the community that are already supporting us. And it's given them in the past, and yesterday gave them an opportunity to hear where we are as a school system, to get a pulse of where we are, some of the successes we're having, but also some of the challenges that we're facing right now. Because oftentimes we know that our different partners, there's a peripheral understanding about what they think is happening in the school system. To actually hear from our superintendent and spend time with cabinet and other individuals in the organization gives them a deeper understanding of what actually is happening. Just to also understand what they're navigating, especially our nonprofits right now and our businesses, considering the fiscal climate that many of them, that are impacting many of them. So what Dr. Dyson wanted to do was to bring them in to share with them, to thank them, and to also share with them what we're facing right now and how we can really come together to better support our students. So that we're not spinning our wheels independently, but we're spinning the same plate to aim at the same goal. So yesterday was the first iteration of that. We have a lot of partners within Frederick County. We're very fortunate here in this community. So we couldn't meet with all of them in the same space yesterday. So we took half of them, and we met with them yesterday, and we'll take the other half and do the same meeting with them in the spring. From the feedback that we're collecting from them, really think about how we can better work with our different partners in the community to support our students and their families. A lot of our nonprofits do that as well.
And the reason why I asked Dr. Loris Phillips to share that with you is if the intention of this policy is to foster community engagement, that's just one example of how we are, without even having the policy in place, engaging in that kind of interaction and communication to strengthen the partnerships we have.
And some of those partners we have formal agreements with, and some of them we do not. It really depends on the desire and the need of that particular relationship. We're there.
Yeah, if I can just say that, well, I'll make a motion that we send this for first reading to the board,
I'll second that.
and then we can go on discuss.
Go ahead.
So I know a number of years ago, my husband adopted the water feature at Tuscarora Elementary because goodness knows why it was put in with the idea that the high school students would come over and take care of it, and that never happened. And we, at that time, this goes back, I hate to say, like nearly 20 years, and just thought about like doing a partnership because he owns a business, and then we were like kind of given the hands on. And it was very unclear at that time how that, and they were revamping. I think Ann Vodatatovas was in charge of businesses. That kind of gives you a time frame. And it was just unclear. So I like the idea of making it very clear to the community organizations, the businesses, because so often in the past it was, well, a school needs this, or the system needs this. And I think the businesses and organizations felt that they had, it needs to be a win-win, that they were being asked for a lot and not just even asked their opinion of what should education provide for future workers or things like that. So I know there have been the opportunities and modifications to make it more that win-win and mutually beneficial. And so I'm very glad to hear, and I know Dr. Dyson had mentioned to us on the board that that was one of her ways in times of tight budgets with everybody having challenges, how can we all mutually help and benefit our students by working together. So
And our manager of partnership and engagement, Tiana Hill, does a wonderful job of facilitating those conversations. So public affairs, we're the facilitator. So a group will come to us, or a member of the FCPS team will come to us and say, we want to partner. So she'll facilitate that meeting with the appropriate team or department that would facilitate and oversee that partnership. And so she's really good at making sure she explains that whether it should be a formal partnership or not, and directing our community members to the right FCPS team member who would like to work with us in situations such as the one that you described years ago.
And in the age of the blueprint, where we have a mandate to make sure our students are college and career ready, having the partnerships with businesses and nonprofits where we can, and government, where we can give students opportunities to develop the skills they'll need and apprentice and internships and get out there and do the things that they're going to need to do to be college and career ready it's almost a mandate at this point. It's not even something that we want or option to do. It's something we have to do.
So in the development of the regulations, are we going to include the same type of vetting process that we do for these partnerships, that we do for the community, the family, parent?
In terms of like background checks, is that what you mean?
Yes, and like how we're going to bring these
What's
individuals in.
that's part of,
Yes.
you want to explain what we
Because really what happens if, let's say that the society that we move forward with a formal partnership with a nonprofit or a business in the community, the individuals who work for that organization or that nonprofit would then have to go through, if they're going to come into our schools and volunteer, they would have to go through that process. If they're a visitor, they'd have to go through the visitor process. So any adult that's entering the school will have to go through it, even though it's separate, separate policies. They still work together because any adult who is partnered with us, who belongs to that organization, will have to go through that process.
One of the things that we've been wrestling with and why we were we're trying to work in tandem is we've had a couple of circumstances where some of our partners, not these official partners, but like fire and rescue or the zoo or whatever, wanted to come in and our school leaders were kind of confused about what level of screening they required. And so what we're hoping is to bring some clarity in the regulation to say what is the difference between a visitor and a volunteer. Because if someone's coming in from the zoo and they're completely under the supervision of staff at all times, then they're a visitor. They can do Raptor and, screen in like we would anybody. But if they are going to be spending any unsupervised time with students or going to be running a program or anything like that, they have to be background checked and they have to be fingerprinted. And so we're trying to bring some clarity to that. I actually think, to the credit of our leaders, they're overburdening themselves. They're telling just people who are coming in to do anything, they have to be background checked. And we're saying, no, well, if they're under your supervision, you can just screen them in through Raptor. But that's sort of some work that we've been talking about doing to make it clear that just being a partner does not, you don't get out of that. Even if you're an official partner, we have to have that done.
Yeah.
I was also, oh, sorry, go
I was
ahead.
just saying, I can speak to that 6 years ago when I was on the board of directors of the Girls Club. We'd work in schools, and when we were bringing people in, we'd say, oh, we've already background checked and all that, and FCPS would say, no, sorry. And they would have to go through FCPS's full complement of
Correct.
background check and fingerprinting in order for us to operate within the school.
Yeah, because I think that there have been, I know, some requests through PIA in the past about kind of informal partnerships that just aren't on record per se. So that, I would want something concrete so that no matter whether it's kind of informal or formal, that we have the same process.
Yeah, so obviously the formal partnerships are documented in written agreements, and we can include language in written agreements that say if you're going to be in contact with students and unsupervised, you must go through our background check process. One of the things that the regulation will do, and it doesn't exist in current form, is provide guidance to the principals who are making the more informal partnerships with their local community about needing to document, here's something. It doesn't have to be a 10-page MOU. It can be something very brief that checks these boxes.
Right.
What we do is at the end of every year, and you'll see this in the partnership report, when you flip to the back of that, you'll see the school and
informal
all the partners that school has, because what will happen is a school, for example, they may decide to that school may decide to have a partnership with a fraternity or a sorority to come in and do some mentorship type of work. It's not a systemic partnership with a formal signing, but it will be
Right.
between that school and that organization. However, each of those individuals who are part of that sorority or fraternity would have to go through the volunteer training and the background check in order to be able to come in and work. So we do ask for schools to update the partnerships that they have every year so that we can have an accurate accounting of that in the partnership report.
Okay, good. I just, I want a means for the community or a parent to be able to access that information, knowing who's interacting with their kids.
I think I'm remembering this. You ask every school that doesn't have formal partnership agreements to report every partner that they're working with. So we do already collect that, and
Yeah, so
that's
we
in
put it
the
in-
report.
Yeah, that's in the,
So we do have that. We do have
the
that.
back of that thing is full of.
Yeah.
and
We ask the
earmarked
schools to
by
read
every
who
school.
are working with,
So-
and, it could be the bank, it could be the,
Yep.
there's all kinds of community-based
And
partners.
again, we have one person in the system that does that for us, Tiana. She does a phenomenal job of organizing all of that for us, and she, along with other members of the PA team, help to inform this and policies as well.
Okay, great.
What I think might help, Mr. Lewis or Dr. Lewis-Phillips, why would a partner want an agreement or need an agreement versus an informal relationship? What's the threshold for saying, we're gonna pursue a partnership agreement with FCPS and we're just gonna volunteer our time at Hillcrest? What's the threshold for
That's a
that?
good question. Part of that is, so when a group comes to us initially, and oftentimes the desire to form a partnership will come to public affairs, or will go to the school or to a curriculum department, for example. And what happens after that is that Tiana will bring together the necessary parties in FCPS, along with that particular entity, and they'll have that conversation. And really, so a large part of that is, what is the scope of the desire to help and support. And it could be that some just want to work with the school. That's what they have the capacity to do. It could be that that partner wants to work with several schools. And if that's the case, then it may lead to a formal partnership with FCPS. So it really depends on that meeting and that conversation. Sometimes the nonprofit or the community, the business they want to be big, and then there's certain things that we can't do in a partnership. We can't necessarily provide free access to facilities for you to use and things like that. So it's a deep discussion about the desire, what we can and cannot do if it's going to be a systemic partnership compared to a school to partner partnership. And then we have some partners that are they have several schools that they're working with. It's not necessarily a systemic partnership. It just comes down to the conversation and being able to determine what the desire is. And when they hear what we can and cannot do, sometimes that causes them to roll back the scope of what they like to do with our schools and support.
So a lot of the MOUs for the partnership agreements have data sharing, they have sort of components that are more formal and structured, right?
So, yes, and in an ideal world, I would love for every partnership, informal or formal, to be documented in an agreement that outlines both parties' roles and responsibilities, expectations, liabilities.
That may be something that Dr. Lewis-Phillips and I can talk about working on, even if it's a one-sheeter, like a registration page, this is the school we're interested in working at, this is the scope, this is the strategic goal our work supports, that kind of a thing. So we can talk about maybe instituting something that will be feasible, that our principals could direct them to
It's
complete.
manageable for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all part of the regulation
That's what I
development.
was just gonna say.
We'll
if that could
look at that for the
become part of
regulation.
that, The regulation.
That sounds good.
The terms
Clear
of
the guidelines.
partnership, when it
Right.
expires.
Yes.
This past month ago or something, when they handed out the full partnership booklet again, and something came to mind is that I wonder if the board should look at actually forming a board committee around partnerships. And
What would that committee do?
well, I think of it like I'm on the Citizens Advisory Council. We get a lot of great information from our community members and our citizens. I also served 2 years on the Career and Technical Education Advisory Council, which really is our partners that work with us through our CTE education. So mostly it's through the trades and things like that, but they're tremendous partners and we get a lot of great information and feedback from them. I just wonder, looking at how this has grown how massive it is, if it just would be beneficial to the board to have a committee made up of some of those partners that could help us understand the relationship and how we can continue to improve it.
I mean, my initial reaction to that is not that it's a bad idea to engage them, but that we have some structures that Dr. Dyson has already put in place to get that. So we just had yesterday our first of our, the business roundtable that she had run. So now we've rebranded it as Scope.
Right.
Right? And so I feel like we have some structures. My first reaction would be to see how those structures get at that interest, and if they're not sufficient, to maybe come back to the board and explore another one. I don't know what your thoughts are, Dr. Lors-Phillips.
For those particular events, though, board are not excluded from participating, are they? So if we wanted to participate in
Or
those
would be
activities-
interested in incorporating, making that maybe, I guess, a bigger deal than just handing out the booklet.
You're talking about the
If there
presentation.
was an actual presentation on, here's what we learned from our 2 scope meetings this year, and here's our new partnership.
Like an annual partnership, maybe sort of
Annual
bring it.
partnership presentation.
And I think this pendulum has swung,
I was about to
right?
say, we've done both
Yes.
of them.
Okay.
We've had actual partners come in, 1 or 2 during that presentation of the booklet to share with you all.
Yeah, yeah.
The impact that they're having and that we're having on what
Yeah.
we do. So we've done that, and we can do that
I
again.
remember, I think it
Yeah.
may be just a staff presentation on, here's what we learned from our scope meetings this year.
Excuse me.
Here's our new.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think we
too.
can make a note to share with Dr. Dyson and put this in the queue of our board presentations, because we map the whole year out for all of our board presentations and agenda setting, as you all are ready to receive that. I don't know what the right timing is for that.
Yeah. I think somehow timing it around the, I guess, however you look at them as a fiscal meeting year or
Well,
an annual meeting, how you.
We
meet
do
them.
have there is a rhyme or reason to, why has the partnership reporting been primarily in the fall? It's like October, right?
It gives us time from the previous year to
Catch up.
tabulate everything, to get all the updated partnerships for the
Right.
schools, and then to actually do the production work for the final product, which is the booklet that you will have.
So this first scope meeting was now in November, and you said you've split it
Another one in the spring.
in the spring. I think it would be good to have a presentation, maybe, just to coincide with
That
when
sounds
you're
like a
ready
good
to
idea.
release the booklet.
Yeah, because like we love the booklet, but I'm not sure that the public really gets to understand from the presentation of that at a board meeting, because it's such a visual thing, and I know it gets flashed up there, but I think and now that the scope meetings are new, that would be good to have the board get a report on that as
Yeah, we
well.
used to have it early in like August, September, but there's a lot of things a lot of products that we're producing at that time, so we pushed it out a little bit into, I think late October we did it.
That was good.
And I don't think the timing is important as getting it out to the public. And also, it as an opportunity to answer some of Nancy's questions for the public of who's where and highlights, here it is.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole pamphlet's available to everyone to look at.
Right.
Who's in your school. So I think it'd be great.
Yeah, we'll make a note.
Right, so you already have a motion?
Thank you. So
Okay.
I interrupted you.
Nope, you-
No, that's all right, I interrupted.
Thank you.
I'm all good.
Yeah. Are we good? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Are we all good about moving this forward to first reading?
Sure.
All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, next we have 1.06, Policy 427, Religious Expression.
So the marked up copy of Policy 427, Religious Expression, is in your agenda packet at page 38. This is being presented to the Policy Committee for the first time. It was adopted in January of 2007, sorry. It was last updated in November of 2022. The existing policy was adequate, but it was not robust enough. It needed additions, it needed enhancements. So my team, mostly Mr. Dubé, did a great deal of research to ensure that the language aligns with the current state of the law. And so what you'll see in the proposed edits is intended to reflect the research that Mr. Dubé did. We are revising the policy purpose. We are proposing to revise the policy purpose to reframe it as a set of guidelines to navigate balancing the First Amendment right of the individual to the free exercise of religion and the prohibition on the government-endorsed religion in the Establishment Clause. We've added 3 new definitions to the 2 that already existed: government speech, personal time, and private speech. And these definitions are derived directly from legal authorities, such as the Supreme Court's decision in Kennedy against Bremerton School District, which is a decision I gather at least one of our panel members is familiar with. That was the decision coming out of the state of Washington with the coach who was praying on the football field after the football game. So the point being, though, that the definitions are not arbitrarily selected. They're deriving from legal authority. The policy statement is largely intact with what was previously presented or what is currently in place, with making sure to include that recognition of the distinction between the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause, including the existing the words themselves from the First Amendment that establishes that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, that's the Establishment Clause, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, that's the Free Exercise Clause. The real changes you'll find are in the implementation. D1 is largely unchanged except to add clarifying language to reinforce that distinction between public officials and private individuals. D2 adds language regarding instructional materials, that instructional materials will be selected in accordance with board policy and FCPS regulation, that guest speakers will be subject, who may want to speak on a subject that touches upon religion, that they will be subject to the guest speaker policy and regulation. And that the display of religious symbols under the right circumstances may be permitted if it's a part of the curriculum or if it's secular and not religious in nature. Those symbols may be displayed. D3 is unchanged. D4 removes the facilities language because we've decided that deserved its own standalone section, and so that appears later. D5, the student prayer and religious discussion. Again, the edits are really intended to recognize the different intentions of the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. So, by way of example, in 5A, we add student-directed, that students have the same right to engage in student-directed individual or group prayer. Again, because that is the free exercise of their religion while keeping the teachers or staff out of that insofar as that makes them the government establishment of religion. Really, all of the edits in that section are intended to address that. D6 is substantially unchanged. We are removing the teaching values and the questions regarding religious expression. The character counts reference, that's not a program that we really have continued. We've moved away from that. Some schools still use it, but we've really, as a system, moved away from that with the implementation of our social-emotional learning curriculum. And the board doesn't need to mandate that questions come to legal services, and frankly, they probably shouldn't come first to legal services. That doesn't mean principals don't give me a call all the time to ask me questions, because they absolutely do. But it's really not something that the board should be mandating, because oftentimes those questions can be answered without having to contact legal services. A question to the director that oversees the schools is often enough. The facilities use is there. That's, like I said, we've relocated it, making sure that it's clear that we will treat our religious organizations in our community and our non-religious organizations who want to use our facilities the same. We're not going to differentiate. D8 is a brand new insertion. This is the distribution of religious texts. It seems like at least once a year I get a question about the Gideon Bibles and whether they're permitted in our schools. They are. They can be distributed in our schools. There is case law that supports the right of schools to do that in the Fourth Circuit. There are restrictions. They have to be in a controlled space. They have to be accessible to adults, not children. There's a defined time period where they may be displayed, and the organization has to come and get them back when that period is done.
My one question really on that, I'm glad you reminded me, when it said a at the end of the distribution period. Is there a set time or you just agree to that?
3 days.
Thank you.
We don't put that in here because 3 days is a regulatory piece. It's not necessarily, well, we may decide in the future, 5 days is, do it for a whole school week. It is a question that that has come up year after year, and I have had outside organizations who are First Amendment advocates send me letters about this saying, you should do it, you shouldn't do it, depending on which side of the perspective of the First Amendment you are on. And I have researched this. This is very clearly permissible under the Fourth Circuit authority. So it was my suggestion that we incorporate that into the policy so there's a clear statement to the community that we understand that the law says we are permitted to do this and in fact required to do this. The last is simply a direction to the superintendent to make sure that this policy is referenced in our student code of conduct and parent handbook and in the employee code of conduct, so it's out there and so people are aware we do have a religious expression policy here and they know where to go to look for it to see what it says, and then of course to create a regulation to support the policy. So those are the recommended edits to the religious expression policy. Happy to answer any questions, and the recommendation is to approve it as is to advance to the board for a first reading.
Okay.
So when we talk about official neutrality regarding religious activity, this is under D, implementation number 1A. School employees and volunteers, when acting in their official capacities as public officials or representatives of the state, are prohibited by the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment from actively participating in such activity with students. Then we go down, and then we're talking about student activity. And we're talking about, so we're prohibiting a teacher who may be aligned with this particular religious activity, okay, as in their own personal beliefs, from interacting with students that have created a club that align with her religious beliefs.
Yes, because we have to, because the teacher acting as a member of the staff, as a representative of Frederick County Public Schools and the Board of Education of Frederick County, you encroach upon infringement of the Establishment Clause.
So that teacher actually couldn't lead a study with that group.
It needs to be student-led.
It has to be student. Is that not infringing upon the religious rights of the teacher and the instructor?
They are free to express their religion outside of their capacity as an official actor. So if they want to organize a group that meets in a nearby, at the library or a nearby facility, and students attend that, that's them acting in their individual capacity, not acting as a representative of Frederick County Public Schools and the Board of Education. It is a difficult line to navigate, and it's what the court in Bremerton tries to do, saying that when he is, after the football game, kneeling in prayer, that's not a part of his official duties, that he's not,
Right, so this would not be, an after school, after their workday, they're making a volunteer effort to participate with the students.
But as a staff member leading the activity, or as a staff member overseeing the activity, then they are acting in their work capacity. Yeah. And they're not off turf.
They can run a Bible study on Saturday with students.
Right.
Like I used to, this is a long time ago, I was in Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and my coaches were there, but we weren't at our school. We were
You were on your own time.
someone's home, or we were at a church, or a community center.
It's all about the nexus to your job.
Got it. Okay, I just wanted clarification on that, because I felt like that was, there may be some blurred lines there.
This is a hard one for teachers. Like, this is one that I felt like I never had a problem with. And I took school law, and Jamie Cannon was actually my instructor there. And it was always like, if you're gonna read your Bible, leave it at home, But I got to go to Monticello for social studies teachers, and there was a wide variety from 4 different states. And it was so interesting to talk to the people from a more southern state, like this teacher from Richmond, and she's like, well, I just get so upset when I'm trying to do my Bible study and the students are bothering me, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, in what world is this a public school?
But if that teacher
If it's
is
on her own
on her own time.
No, the students were, it was like maybe, well, no, she had students in the classroom, and they're supposed to be doing silent reading is what, it was just like, no, she was on her job. It wasn't like her lunchtime, and, and so it was just like, it was such a different world. But I had a teammate who was very involved in her church, had thought about becoming a nun at one point, and yet was very discombobulated with one of her young students, elementary, brought a Bible to school, and I just had school on. He can do that. She was like, I don't know, I'm just not sure. Sure, he can do that. He's allowed to do that. What he can't do is corner another student and proselytize. They cannot do that. But he could include it in his writing, and she's, I have to check with the principal. Go right ahead. And of course, it was fine for that student to bring the Bible, to read the Bible, to write about the Bible. I had a student one year that didn't want to make a big deal. She was Muslim, and she wanted to celebrate Ramadan. She wanted to fast for Ramadan, and her parents left it totally up to her, and she worked it out with me. I went to the principal, explained the situation. She didn't want to go to lunch because students would ask her. It would be hard to sit with food, and we worked out, where she went to her siblings' kindergarten class during lunch. And then we suggested maybe she not fast on field day or a field trip that we had to Annapolis, because that would be really taxing on a young body. And we worked it out, and it was no big deal. And she got to do what she did. None of the other students knew and didn't pay attention. And so these things can easily be worked out. And people, I just find, so it's really, what I'm saying is it's very good, and kind of going off of our public comment this morning, that teachers have a clear understanding that, yes, you can discuss religion, you just can't push a religion. Last story I'll tell, I had a student read a book called Moses about Harriet Tubman. Not one student in the class understood the reference to the name Moses. So I felt that I needed to fill in, educate them on where this title came from and why it would be applied to Harriet Tubman. And so, but other people would be like, you can't do that because it's religion. And it's all in how it's done, I think, is kind of what you're saying.
I have one question. On D5, D, I want to make sure we're consistent here, because the addition, just kind of to give it context there, it says school system employees may be present to monitor for supervision. This is when students gather, say, I think the example was the flagpole, or they go, but still on school grounds. So staff is there to supervise and make sure. But the addition says may only participate in their capacity as a private individual. By participate, are you saying they can participate in the prayer?
So the idea here is, if the See You at the Flagpole event is after school, it's not an in-school activity, a staff member can be there to make sure a brawl doesn't erupt, right? We want to make sure our students remain safe. But if it is after school and after school hours, they can participate individually.
See, I think that's inconsistent with what
Yeah, I
we're
was
saying
like
about they can't lead because also I think it's inconsistent with the law.
I think I heard it, though, as the same thing that he described earlier, which is that we don't govern what you do in your personal life.
But on school grounds we do.
Right, but this is Bremerton.
But
This is the coach that goes and kneels at the 50-yard line after the game, and students come and kneel.
But they joined him, and actually Bremerton and Mergens were pretty consistent about he couldn't join the students. The students, if the students were participating in prayer, he could not go over and then participate. He could go to the field and kneel in prayer, and if the students joined him, that was different. And then I looked at the Board of Education v. Mergens. It's very consistent with saying staff participation in religious activities with students on school grounds, even after school hours, is not permissible.
So, but staff participation, just those words, I think it's, you know, how do you,
Well, I mean, we're saying participate, so we're using the word
Well-
participate. And I
Different
think
than
that's just, I
supervise.
think, one, I think that's
Yeah,
against the
I
law.
gotcha.
And two, I think it's inconsistent with what we're saying about they can't participate in a club. If, let's say, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes is holding a meeting at 5 o'clock on school grounds in a classroom because they rented it. Previously, we're saying that would not be permitted. So I don't see why we would permit them to go outside in the parking lot or whatever if the students were having a rally. I understand they should be there to supervise, but I don't understand why we would allow them to participate.
So I'll go back and confer with Mr. Dubay, because again, Mr. Dubay did a lot of the research to support the edits. And if the panel advances this to the board, if it is inconsistent with the law, it will come out. If it is not inconsistent with the law, I'll be prepared to answer the question and give you more specific citation.
Yeah, because I do think, I think you're right. I think that's going to need clarification
I
or
agree.
additional language to, so that those, like I said, the lines seem to be a little blurred there with.
Yeah, I think it either has to be
with the-
all or
with the
none.
two-
It can't
The two
be.
statements, yeah, yeah.
So are you comfortable with us moving it forward to first reading with that caveat?
Yes,
We'll look deeply into,
after discussing this further with Mr. Dubay and
We are okay.
and reviewing
are you okay if we are?
I'm fine with it. I mean, I'm more than happy to remove it if I find that that it is inconsistent with the state of the law. I'm also fine with being prepared to answer the question if I leave it in.
Okay, great, I appreciate that.
and it may just need some rewording to make it
Wordsmithing.
more clear.
Yep.
Clear,
Yes.
more clear, yes. That
Yeah,
you can't join, students can join you, you can't join them,
okay.
Right,
basically,
right.
so.
To-
All right, I
Give
won't,
it some more definitive parameters.
right.
Okay.
Yes, 'cause we-
Any other questions,
Oh.
though, at any other part of the policy, or?
No, but, and I was just going to say, and the regulation should probably also be very specific about the defined areas.
I agree.
Yeah, again, we're the what, and they're the
Yeah.
how, so they've got to be very specific about those
And this
duties
is
and how
one, I
they'll happen.
totally agree.
Yeah.
That just because people question and they don't feel confident or comfortable, and the clearer the lines can be, the more direction it can give people, the better.
I'm good.
Okay,
All
so I'll make a motion that we move this forward to the board for first reading with the clarification of
5D,
the discussion that we've had.
but I do, yes.
Yep.
Good.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor? All right, we're all good.
Excellent.
All right, next is 1.07, summer school eligibility.
All right, so summer school eligibility starts on packet page 50. You will see this as a clean copy only because the prior version was,
This is the prior
the
version?
prior version was one short paragraph. So rather than bother with a markup, we decided we will decommission the old one and just start fresh with a new one.
Okay.
This
Nowhere
is
to
the-
go but up.
This is the second time this was presented to the policy committee. It was previously presented at our last meeting on October 22nd, 2025. It was adopted in its current form in February 2008, which is 17 years ago. That policy doesn't say much, which is why we are recommending to abandon it and replace it with the new version. So the proposed new policy changes the title to Summer Programming Eligibility. It establishes a straightforward policy purpose to authorize development and implementation of summer programming. There were no terms that staff felt were required to be defined. The policy statement has 3 parts. Summer programming is for FCPS students, and others can participate at a calculated cost. Summer programming is budget dependent, and the extended school year services are not summer programming, so they are not governed by this policy. The implementation is also a very simple statement directing the superintendent to implement regulations. There's nothing further that the board, this proposed draft policy is asking of staff. I do want to clarify that although it is not stated, we do have federal grant programs that support our summer school activities, and those federal grants do require, in some cases, that we allow non-students who live in Frederick County and meet other requirements to participate in summer programming that we provide. Our FAST summer programming is one of those programs. That will be addressed in the regulation. It may be, when I say a calculated cost, it may be in that circumstance, the calculated cost is zero, subject to whatever the grant's requirements are for participation. If the panel feels like we need to clarify that in the policy, we can certainly do that. My hesitancy in doing that in the policy is we don't know what the state of grants are in the world at this point. It's a very shifting world. And I did ask Ms. Bass, who is our grant manager, to be here to answer any questions that you might have about the grants and the grant programming. It is a relatively straightforward revision to the policy. And again, the recommendation is to approve as is for first reading.
I do have a question. So for under definitions, I would prefer that we actually have a definition of school programming or summer
Summer school programming.
Yeah, summer school programming. Just gives a point of reference to really what the policy is about. So that would be my only update before, and I would be in agreement with your recommendation, but just to add a definition there.
So we do have some language in the policy. In the implementation, we do say these may include summer school, summer camps, credit recovery, and other supplemental learning opportunities. That can be very easily converted into a definition.
Okay, good.
I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, gets it right up there. I was trying to think of a definition myself, and it's like, okay, good, that does
Yeah.
seem to hit
I
it.
think that-
All right, I'll, with that, not rushing, but, because I think the next two are gonna take more time. I have a vaccine. Like, do I need to move my vaccine, time?
Okay, so let's go ahead. I'll make a
Let's go
motion
ahead,
that we
yes.
move this forward to first
First
reading.
reading, second.
With a
With that.
With
the
a addition of a definition.
Okay, did you second?
I second.
Okay.
All right, all in favor? All right. Now we're moving on to discussion items. 1.08, responsible use of social media.
Yeah, so 1.08 is information discussion only. It is presented for the first time for that reason. You'll notice that this is not a 500 series policy, and the reason it is being presented today is because in section D1, it does require the board to review this policy every 2 years. You'll notice that the policy was adopted in March of 2018 and last revised in October of 2020. So the 2 years were met there, and then nothing happened in 2022, and nothing happened in 2024.
COVID was just
That
coming.
would have been the best time to update this thing.
Yeah. And actually could make this
Yeah, once we-
policy could be
right.
extremely short.
Oh, we've got lots
Just
of.
have one purpose, none.
So
No use.
we are here for the board's interests. The only staff notes that I will offer now is that there is heavy reference to law throughout this policy. And there have been changes in the law. There have been Supreme Court decisions that address the use of social media and where the line between a personal use and a employer's use, where that line lives. So we will have to go through to ensure that the law is still applicable and unchanged or updated to reflect changes in law. And then there are also a lot of titles in here that don't exist. Executive directors that don't exist anymore. And this speaks back to a conversation that I have had previously with board members during board sessions about titles wanting to have flexibility. We're going to try and bake that in so we don't have to come back and change the title every
I
couple.
had that circled, because I thought, is that, and like Director of Technology, I know came out of long discussion.
We've also, since this policy, we have the employee code of conduct and the student code of conduct
Yeah,
which are new. We have a pretty substantive section in the Employee Code of Conduct on social media use. That is exhaustive. And, you know, so I think there's also something to be said around these definitions naming platforms, because Lord knows it seems like every day a new platform
Not
name
Twitter
comes
anymore.
out,
Well,
right?
they
Twitter.
changed their names.
Right, but we've also seen a
Let's
need,
get
and
on that.
I'm looking at the Employee Code of Conduct, to sort of extend this notion of social media to things like video sharing platforms,
Yes.
YouTubes, TikToks, Vimeo, professional networking sites like LinkedIn. And then we'd also sort of go even a step further to talk about messaging apps, things like Snapchat, WhatsApp, Telegram. So I think we also sort of need, while the title may not need to change, certainly the board could give us that direction. We've operationalized this in our code of conduct to be sort of any sort of, you know, discussion forum, Reddit, you know, whatever it is, any place where information lives online. We've also sort of put in things around like Remind, Class Dojo, like any place where there's some degree of unconstrained social interaction.
Those teachers use.
Right, and Dojo, yeah, my kids' teachers use that.
Yeah, that's what,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, no.
I'm gonna let you finish. and then
The other piece is, we have had some boundaries in our employee code of conduct that I think would be helpful as we could lift up in this policy, that speaks to sort of what our expectations are around identifying us as your employer.
Yes.
Interestingly, we sent a message out earlier this year, I'm just looking here, in Employee News that we sent out in September. And my recollection is this is on the heels of Charlie Kirk being shot and a couple of other things, reinforcing this idea of like what your constitutional right to free expression is, where that starts and stops. And sort of that as your employer, you don't have unlimited rights. You're right. So we did talk about that. But what's most interesting about not our message, but MSEA, which is the sort of oversight group, the Maryland State Education Association, which is an arm of NEA, has even stronger language that they've put out for employees, basically saying you just can't say whatever you want, and that there could be consequences for that.
That's good, because
Yeah.
it is a message that reinforces not just the administration, but
Right.
the union.
And sort of there's this idea of credibility, not credibility is not the right word, but what we've said in our message to employees is that we would not support conduct that is online or public statements that celebrate violence or death, that harassment, demeaning language, or biased remarks about protected groups, or actions that suggest you cannot carry out your professional duties.
Yeah.
Right, so we do have some things, but it would be really helpful to get those brought into some policy language, and so just wanted to share, we've sort of,
I would agree with that, because I do think that, you know, sometimes, you know, even though you're employed by the school system and you identify yourself as an employee, you're also, much like we are as an elected official, in the public eye. And, you know, I think that as an elected official, you are cautious about what you say and what you put in print and what people can use.
Sometimes.
and I think Mr. Blivis would always, right, I mean, I think because what he'd say is,
Yeah, but.
having a personal opinion itself is not problematic. You have the
It's
right to
not.
express your
Correct.
own opinion, even if someone doesn't agree with it, even if it's
But
unpopular.
attaching it to your employer is a whole different.
Correct.
And then there's
Yeah.
always the line between, like, kids always wanted to know who I was voting
Oh, right, isn't that, yeah, they are really.
Always. And sometimes, well, I won't go into that story at this point, but they can misunderstand things that you didn't even say. But, so I'd always say, no, I'm not gonna, there's a policy, but I'm not gonna tell you that because, you know, then you're gonna look at me, if it's different elementary kids, if it's different who your parents are voting for, you're gonna be like, how do I continue to teach you? And that's what some people say these things, I just shake my head and I go, okay, really? Did you need to say that? Just like, learn to, just, because if people then start to question your ability to objectively teach their children,
Correct.
that impacts your ability to do your job.
That's where the question comes in, when there are posts on
Right.
social media.
And FCTA every year tells, I was at the meeting every year where it's like, just watch what now I did notice in here that it says something about Staff is prohibited from requesting or requiring an employee or applicant for employment to disclose any account credentials for personal social media. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is just already out there in the
We don't have to
public.
ask them. I mean, it's not like they have to share their stuff with us, it's out there.
Right, but I mean, like, if it's a private one that you've kept private, that you only share with a few
Then your
people,
privacy, yeah.
then, you know, you're not getting into that. But when this stuff is public, that's
Correct.
when the problem comes in.
Phenomenon of wanting to tell the world and everybody what you think about every single thing.
Yes,
Thank you.
as if the world really
Like-
cares, like, you know, but,
Like this
okay.
many people.
And we've had, the one issue we've mostly confronted with employees is actually not on controversial topics, but on making disparaging remarks about colleagues, their supervisor, or the board, or the superintendent. And we do have the right to ask them to take those things down, and we do. Because we're very clear that you cannot disparage or undermine the integrity and credibility of the board, superintendent, your colleagues, or supervisors. Those are actually the biggest complaints we get, is from people who are friends with each other on these social media platforms, and then somebody says something negative about another adult that they work with, and then it comes up to our office, and we have to get involved.
So do we include any internal, like, social media is to me this is speaking to public platform, but the code of conduct when it comes to email,
Yeah,
internal email, there's,
We have the same, I'm trying to think, when we
Same
talk in the code of
guideline.
conduct about expected conduct, we say multiple times, these standards apply to email, social media, text
Okay,
message,
good.
message apps, and other electronic communications, like,
okay, good.
the standards
Yeah,
aren't
so
different.
Right.
right, yeah, the standards should be the same no matter what
Okay.
medium you're communicating in.
Well, there's a lot of tentacles to this one, so I think you've got a big job ahead
Yeah,
of you
yes.
getting the red line version together for us. But
Yeah.
I think it's extremely necessary. And totally agree, we need to make sure we're on track with the 2-year review
Yeah.
process,
Well,
because
that was
this
one of the-
changes
One of
so,
the questions I wanted to ask, is that something you want to retain? Do you want this to be on a 2-year schedule? Do you want this to be on on the regular 6-year schedule? Do you want it to be on a 3, I mean, what do you want to do with that piece of it? Because it creates an additional piece to the workload in terms of getting through all the regulations. We have to add, or all the policies, we have to add this, make sure it's there. And I mean, look, it got dropped for two 2-year cycles. It didn't happen.
I would personally recommend we leave it at 2 years, because I just think things start changing so quickly, particularly on the AI side. I mean, God knows where we'll be in 2 years. So for now, I would like to see us leave it on a 2-year review schedule.
What's on our 1-year review schedule? How many policies?
There's only a handful of them. Graduation is one. The anti-racism policy, which is the next one, is another one.
If I can say, there are a couple of things in here that refer to annuals. So, no, this is more the thing to.
Our communication to employees annually.
Yes.
Yeah, right, exactly. Responsibility to communicate to SCPS students, parents, and employees.
Yeah.
But there's also an annual, the very last thing before cross-reference, an annual report will be provided to the board regarding implementation of this policy.
That's gonna probably come out.
Okay, I was gonna say, so let's just, we wanna make sure we're not saying.
Leave
"Choose
anything in
here,
there we're
annual
undoing."
here."
I might suggest that let's redline it and bring it back and see, because my vision for this is to have it not be so fragile that a change in platform and technology drives a policy change, that I think the principles that govern what we're asking could be timeless to some extent.
So it maybe could go 3.
It could go 3 maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that's, yes.
But even if you went 2, I mean, there's nothing to say that you don't say, okay, looks good.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with every 2 years, we look at this and go, hey, looks good.
I mean, the graduation policy, as an example, it's in every year. The changes that we've made to the policy that were presented this year are not substantive changes. They're cleaning up a footnote that was incorrectly self-referencing, cleaning up a table to make it more understandable, not making a change to what's the content. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a very quick.
Because I think what's also interesting is there is ongoing cases, ongoing discussions around where do students check their First Amendment rights? Do they check their First Amendment rights when they walk in the school? There's actually outstanding cases talking about that. So who knows where we'll be in 2 years? So I just think,
I would propose
You know.
annually, and the only reason for that is, or my reasoning for that is that it would be less cumbersome because of the constant changes that are happening to update the policy, this particular policy, on an annual basis than it would be after 2 years. So maybe the changes, like you said, if they're not significant, it moves through quickly. If they are significant, then they can be addressed in a timely way.
So typically, it takes us about a year to get from presentation at the policy committee to completion of a second reading, or longer.
Wow.
It is,
Okay.
and maybe a part of that is because we are doing a careful look at every single policy.
as an example, when will this be back to us?
Well, if you take out the 2-year.
No, I'm just saying, no.
The red
When
line.
will this be?
Oh, yeah, no, the
Let's be back to
red
us.
line is not scheduled to be presented till March.
So there you
Oh,
go.
wow.
It's gonna, because of the number of policies and the insertion of, the addition of, the board asked us to look at 101. The board asked us to look at 102. That pushed back some of the 500 series work, and I had to revise the roadmap. The religious expression was originally slated to come to you for information discussion only, so I could hear what you guys are thinking about. And because of those changes, it was like, nope, we're just going to make it an information discussion action. We'll present a proposal to you. We try and do discussion first, then presentation. It's not always possible, but yeah, this one's not coming back until March.
Yeah. So let's say
Okay,
in
so
best
2
case
years.
scenario, this goes to the
I'll
board
sit
in
with
June.
2 years then. Yeah.
So we could go with 2 years. I think with the acknowledgement that they're always aware if a law changes in opposition to one of our policies, it gets
It
put
will
back,
come
it
back,
comes back to
yes.
us. So, yeah.
Right, so we don't,
Okay, so we don't need to, we're just consensus here that
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
just,
we'll
just
come
back to us in
sounds
March.
good.
Vicki, can you make a note just to flag the template?
And this is the same for this anti-racist.
And next one is our annual review, 1.09 of policy 117, anti-racism.
Yeah, so this is an annual review. This was adopted in 2022, and I don't think it's been reviewed since. Nope, it hasn't. It's supposed to be annual, and it got adopted, and here we are 3 years later. It got adopted on 11/9. We are 3 years and 10 days later, and we're back for the first time reviewing it. We're also here just to hear your board's interest. I don't have any comments to add. I don't know if Dr. Harris or Dr. Artis have anything that they would like to add, before we hear from the panel. The only thing I will say is that we do have a mandate in the policy to include the Racial Equity Committee in the conversation. And so this will have to have some time so we can get this in front of Racial Equity Committee and have that conversation with them. And I'm looking ahead, and this is slated for May. And that's why it's slated for May, because we need to have the time to get this in front of the Racial Equity Committee. So, Dr. Harris, is there anything you'd like to add before we turn it over to?
No, just interested in hearing the board's interests, and then we'll move forward with getting input from the Racial Equity Committee, and making adjustments to the regulations subsequently.
Can I ask a question for the board, and maybe for you, Dr. Harris? One of the items in here, item C, talks about the board directing the superintendent to create measurable benchmarks and action plans for reducing and eliminating disproportionality. And then it goes on to talk about this reporting. But all of our KPIs have this embedded, and so I just want to, I'm just submitting for consideration. Isn't this duplicative of existing reporting that we do? Or what are your thoughts on that particular aspect of it, now that you've lived with it for a few years?
We've been very intentional in incorporating all of the reporting that's required here in our KPI
So
presentation.
it's not a separate one?
So it's not a separate one.
Okay.
It's embedded within those.
Just wondering if we might want to surface that language a little bit more clearly, because what it reads like is that you're doing a separate anti-racism report, and you're really not. You're reporting, you'd be reporting this data without this policy, I guess is what I'm saying, because this
Right.
is part of our commitment to reducing disproportionality that MSD expects of us, and we expect of ourselves.
Yeah, at the time, the board's interest was to incorporate this reporting within existing reporting that we do regularly to the board, not separate and apart from.
Are there other aspects of this policy, now that you all have lived with it, that you see having maybe as an opportunity to revisit or remove or add or change?
So since the policy has been created, there's been a lot of work that staff has done in adherence to this. And so the policy calls for making sure that incidents are reported, that our staff, our students, our community has various ways to report. And so when you go on our website, you will see very clear reporting procedures. You will also see multiple ways to report, whether by hand or whether electronic format. We also have, this calls for changes in how we look at our curriculum to make sure that our students are represented in our curriculum appropriately. And so there are processes whereby those who will be impacted by the curriculum are representative on curriculum review committees. And so, for example, if we are approving resources for multilingual learners, then making sure that we have representation from the multilingual learner community involved in the process. So it's those sort of things that we've been very, very intentional about. With regards to the monitoring, we have since created dashboards whereby staff are able to monitor the reporting that comes in and be proactive in responding to incidences. So if we see a lot of uptick in different types of reporting from a school or from a level, then we are able to work with the school, with the directors, to be able to address whatever concerns proactively. What supports do you need to be able to address some of the needs that you're finding in your school? So those are just some of the things, and I'm missing some other things.
I think you covered. I think I would just add that, with the reporting, I would say it's been enhanced, especially because of this policy. Because previously, things were pretty defined by the bullying, harassment, intimidation policy and by the MSD restrictions. If there was an incident where we did not have an individual victim or individual offender, we were not able to really capture that information. I would say since this has been put in place, so if we see like a symbol of hate on a bathroom stall, for example, prior to this, we really weren't able to capture the information or have an official way to report that. But stemming from this policy, we have since implemented a way to report that from all stakeholders. So whether it's a student or a staff member or anyone that sees these images or experiences something or hears something at a sporting event or whatever it might be, the enhanced reporting structures have really stemmed from this policy.
I remember having a discussion with students in the SOCA organization and them talking about that. If you had just an isolated incident at that time, this goes back a few years, that wasn't bullying, because bullying has to be repeated and targeted, but yet you could still so there was a gap. So I think also the students have helped fill in those gaps. The Racial Equity Committee.
Students have really informed our procedures and some of the things that they wanted us to do to be able to enhance reporting and to be able to report and respond to incidences that they were seeing in their schools. So we did get a lot of feedback from students. The student member of the board at that time was able to give us some information, and then of course the students on the Racial Equity Committee.
The one section I'm wondering if we might want to massage some of the language is on Section E, hiring and training. just the overall tone of the board directs the superintendent, the board directs the superintendent, sort of just is very different than I think a lot of the other policies. But even more broadly, this idea of diversifying the workforce is sort of a state expectation. And I think there's some different language that we could bring into, I think this is like very prescriptive in a way that it's not intended, if that makes sense, because it says things like, you know, the board directs superintendent to monitor the hiring of teachers. Well, we do an annual hiring report anyway. It's required by the, so I wonder how we can surface, again, it sounds like it's something that doesn't exist somewhere else outside of this policy, and it does, so how we can show those connections. And I also think this idea of the board directs the superintendent to seek input from the associations on recruitment and retention. As you both know, because we work so closely together, we have a lot of work we're doing that's sort of an outcome of Blueprint that is to sort of look at recruitment and retention. I just wonder if there's a better way of capturing Section E. You know, it's just a question mark. We do an annual report to the board on our hiring. You know, we have goals, we have strategic goals that speak to this. We have KPIs that speak to this. I don't know, I just wonder if we could use some speak to existing work instead of making it sound like something different or new.
Yeah, since 2022, there's been a lot of work.
A lot of
that's
change,
been
right,
done,
yeah,
a lot of
fair point,
changes.
yeah, fair point.
So particularly with hiring and training, and so there are things in place, other places where now this is not as prevalent as it was when it was developed in 22.
I personally would like to see the reports to also include the efforts that are being made through various activities such as restorative practices and so forth to be reported on those outcomes. So, you know, are these practices working in the schools? You know, have we found that there's one model that works better than another model? When students have been engaged in those practices, what typically has been the outcome? We can keep, you know, privacy, or the student privacy things, and, you know, anybody who's reporting or participating, but to get an idea of the practices that are in place when incidents are reported. So what are those outcomes? What do they look like? And how have they improved the environment or the culture for the students?
With restorative practices, social emotional learning,
Yeah.
all of those things that are proactive and then also responsive to mitigate against some of these incidents
Correct.
from happening.
Yeah.
And I think I'm interested in both, but I'm more interested in the reactive.
Okay.
You know, not,
Yes.
you know, I do have some understanding about the proactive, and I think that that's also been reported on under some of the KPIs. But, yeah,
Because with incidences, depending upon the nature of them and the severity of them, there is an educational component and a response that occurs.
yeah,
Oftentimes, we provide resources to all of our schools with some of those responsive types of things. And then also it's the case where they will reach out to us to say, hey, here's the incident. We need an educational activity that fits whatever the concern was. And then we will either develop or provide them with the resources so that they can follow up and respond to it.
yeah, I do think the community needs to understand that, because, you know, we have had some parents stand up, you know, and give public comment about incidents in our schools that have been, you know, somewhat disturbing, you know, and you think, well, you know, we'll assume as board members, at least I do, that staff did handle it, you know, that this parent, just for whatever reason, there was a breakdown in communication, you know, maybe they still have a grievance, you know, that hasn't been satisfied, so.
Yeah, and I wonder to the extent, I'm almost thinking, like under F, what I might even suggest is that the first two bullets be revised to sort of speak to, we have really, since 2022, we've completely overhauled our concern resolution. If you go to our FCPS website, you go to Connect with FCPS, and you click on concern resolution, for students and families, you know, it says there are 5 different ways you can tell us you have a concern. That's in addition to contacting the ombuds, which is can always be an entry point. But it speaks to hate bias, Title IX, bullying, restraint, informal resolution. Like there's so many ways, and we do easily can report on how many concerns we have received.
Yeah,
So I just think in general we could.
I just think that, yes.
Well, and but to your point, I want to hone in on this. There's a difference between an allegation and a confirmation. And so sometimes, and this is just unfortunate, but sometimes someone will experience something as a thing, but it may not meet the definition of that same thing. And I think bullying is the most common example of that. From my many years as a principal, and I'm sure Dr. Harris can recall, there are times where kids are really bothersome to other kids.
Yes.
It may not be bullying, but it is certainly a bother. It is impacting that child and it needs to be addressed. And so I also think we have to leave space for what a concern is filed as versus what it is and how it's resolved. There's something to be said for that.
Well, we might, put some language in there about
How many reports we've received versus how many are confirmed.
Yes, we monitor for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reports that are received, and we use those to determine patterns and trends.
Right. Well, how many
And
were
also, there are confirmed reports, and that's a pretty substantially different number, much lower than just the concerns that are reported.
correct.
But everything, all reports are investigated to make that determination.
I just think that that's important for the public.
Yeah, to see how many.
Do.
I had this conversation with someone the other day about reports and what does reporting numbers tell you? And I said, I actually think that seeing an increase in reporting numbers is in some ways indicative of a culture that is responsive to complaints. Because if you live inside of an organizational culture where people don't feel like anything happens, they're going to underreport. Because they say, why bother? Nobody cares, nobody does anything. And so on the one hand, I was saying, oh my gosh, sometimes I feel like at least in HR, because we manage all the employee concerns, like the numbers just go up, and yet I see that as a measure of people knowing like we are tight in our investigative process. We investigate every complaint. We have a tracking system. As you all know, I report every month on the number of concerns that have come in, that are open, that are closed by each concern type. So I also think that the reporting numbers, even if they go up, are not necessarily a bad thing. They're more of a surfacing. We want the reports to be 0. Let's just say that. But I do think that this increased transparency around how to file a complaint and that there's such strong tracking, there's something to be said for that as well.
And a lot of
Mentioned something that Ms. Cohen said too about a parent. So one of the things that we try to do in the regulation is provide the feedback loop.
Yeah.
Because it has found that, we have investigated, we've done proactive and even responsive measures within the school, but there is a piece of communication and that feedback loop that goes missing. And so I think that's a significant part that we will address in the regulation again once this is revised.
Okay.
You read my mind, because I was going to say, the biggest complaint we get from parents is just, they don't know. They don't know what happened. And, I mean, this goes back to another board member from another county who's married to a state senator, whose office was next door to a former state senator from Frederick. They got talking about this. And so then she came to me and she said, well, it's all out in our policy. Here's what happens, so that you can talk in, not specifics to the child, but here's what's going to happen. So I think the code of conduct has helped with that, but it's exactly what you were saying, the feedback loop. Like, we can't tell you exactly because of confidentiality, but here's what should have happened, kind of thing.
How would you gauge the impact of this policy since its implementation?
Significant impact in the sense that, one, as Dr. Sergo said, we've heard a strong undercurrent prior to this about the many incidences that were happening throughout our school system, but not captured, not followed up on, because whether students or staff, they just didn't have a way to report it and didn't know how to report it to. So this policy provided a great deal of clarity with that, and we did passing this policy saw a significant increase in the reporting. As Dr. Sergo said, that's not an indication of these are new things. These are just things that are now being documented. Our staff are really responsive that when they hear or when they see or experience any types of incidents that are happening, instead of taking a passive tone and demeanor, they're very proactive about it to mitigate against it in the future. Same with our students, we do regularly check in with our students. We do programming in our schools just to assess how are things going, what are some of the concerns. In our perceptual survey, systemically, we ask specific questions related to this policy just to get a gauge on what is your experience like with hate bias. And so those are some things that we monitor every single year and report those. And then also with some of the training and professional learning that occurs, that has helped also to mitigate against some of the incidences. We're now able to very closely monitor the number of reports, the confirmed incidences, types of reports that are happening, where it's occurring. So all of those things are things that, as a result of this policy, we're very attuned to as a school system.
And then because of this policy and because of the work that you're doing, does that then impact the way we implement preventative measures? Because I'm just as interested in what we're doing to prevent it versus how we react once it happens. So do you see that data helping you to develop?
Yes, and so preventatively, we know when we're seeing trends, we're to put emphasis on our professional learning for the next school year. So based upon the trends and the patterns that we've seen previously, that's where we focus our professional learning throughout the school year. Additionally, we just got finished talking about our partnerships. And so because our community has been attuned to our increased awareness of reporting and things like that, we have some partners from diverse backgrounds who have now become engaged in some of our schools. And so it was an example was mentioned by Dr. Lois Phillips about fraternities and sororities. To help with this, they now have become involved in mentoring some of our students and talking about how do you manage and deal with and respond to different situations in a proactive manner. So we've seen some things like that.
I would say too, so it's responsive, but it's proactive. So if we're seeing the data at a certain grade level, having a certain type of issue with racialized language or something of that sort, we've been able to put together educational activities and working with our instructional directors, make it available to those directors to say, please share this with your principals because we're seeing a pattern with this grade level with this type of behavior. So
No doubt from social media, but
Yeah, we already talked about. But this also allows you to adjust the reactionary side because you're able to say, oh, if we're having repetitive issues, then our reaction's not working either. So,
That's correct.
okay. And I guess what I'm hearing you say too is one of the importance of why this policy was important is it's empowered our staff and our students.
Yes.
again, clarity as far as enforcement since we're running this issue.
Mhm. So on that same line, can I, and I don't, because of the way this policy works kind of seamless, not seamlessly, with our academic categories as well, has there been any discussion about anti-Semitism within our schools and developing or at least acknowledging it somewhere within our system? Because I did a search, it's never mentioned. The word anti-Semitism is never mentioned in policy or regulation. And I think that was one of the arguments that was made when there was all the talk about the pushback. Why do we need an anti-racism policy? We have harassment, bullying, and all that. Well, you need it because it puts a name to it. It adds clarity to what we're trying to achieve. And I just feel the same way when we see across our country the rise in anti-Semitism. We unfortunately have seen incidents right here in our own school system if we've considered incorporating that term in policy somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, neither of us were, I mean, I was here when
Well,
this was.
through your
right,
work,
yeah.
agree that
And-
it's something we should consider.
And so, when we monitor for anti-racism, we also applied the same things
Right, hate
to
bias.
anti-Semitism.
Encompass
And
it.
we capture it all under hate bias. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, where we did see a rise in anti-Semitic types of incidences, that became the focus of our professional learning for the year. And so that's where we sort of leaned into.
I think the rise, I would also say, we're not quite sure the reason, but I would say, for example, if you see symbol of hate on the bathroom stall, previously there would have not have been a way to report that, but starting last year, there was a way then to report an anti-Semitic picture or, image or symbol. So I don't know if it was the incidents itself have increased, but the methods of reporting have been more accessible, so we did see a number last year. And so, again, as we did our trainings throughout the year, we made sure to include training regarding anti-Semitism.
There's an advantage to the broader umbrella of anti-racism, which encapsulates the subsets of anti-Semitism, anti-Catholicism. There are individuals who are very opposed to Catholicism.
There's Islamophobia, there's all the things, right?
But I wonder if we could, as we've always talked about, we're not going to give a complete list, but I wonder if, under the definitions, if we could at least say it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is, so this, to your point, this policy sort of looks at historically marginalized groups from both an academic outcomes lens, but also sort of an outgrowth of bullying and harassment, intimidation that is racially motivated. But I think our hate bias protocols sort of govern the entirety of race, ethnicity, religion, all the different ways in which someone could be persecuted. And so I think it's a question of, it reminds me of the conversation we had about, there was another policy where we were trying to decide whether we do an exhaustive list or not.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was off the top of my head, but I feel like we had.
Dress code to everything.
Thank you. It was a dress code. We were like, how deep do we go?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't see any sort of, I think when you look at this policy, you sort of look at it from that perspective.
And I'm not even saying specifically this policy, in that, is there, like that, our hate bias or our harassment, should we put a name to it, though? Should it be in definition?
Well, because,
Definition,
so I think
this includes anti-Semitism,
I mean, I think that's up to the board. I mean, I think certainly from a
anti-Islamophobia, that, and et cetera,
from a policy statement perspective, you probably could sort of signal or incorporate it. I think there are other kinds of religious persecutions that exist, and so anti-Semitism limits it to Judaism, but I think there are other places where people feel that they can't practice their religion, or they feel.
That's why I said Islamophobia. I mean, same type of thing, but I wonder if, because we've seen the impact of putting a name to this, that it's been a positive influence within our system, if we shouldn't also consider doing the same thing in other areas that have become increased.
Yeah, I think in the reporting that should be recognized, that there should be an identifier of what exactly that particular racist activity was, or that particular activity that was offensive actually, speaks to what that, whether it's anti-Semitism, no matter what it is. I would caution about using any term with phobia in it.
But I was using that as an example of,
I just wouldn't I wouldn't make that a definition.
I hear you saying your interest is not just to call out that there can be religiously motivated hate bias, but to particularly call out anti-Semitism as a type of religiously motivated.
because anti-Semitism doesn't necessarily only include religion. It's a race. If you speak to the Jewish people, they would consider themselves a race of people, not just a religious group of people.
Yeah.
So I think there's also and I appreciate what you said about how you're recognizing that and dealing with it individually as well. I'm just wondering if we should put a name to it. When we recognize the positive impact of what we did here, I wonder if there's not some other positive impacts we could have as a system by just mentioning it somewhere.
You know, I think in the, under the definitions, you know, you have institutional racism and then racism in FCPS. You know, can we not say racism in FCPS, but just give a more broad definition of what's included in racism, which could be the anti-Semitic, where we could incorporate that language. We do speak to ethnic origin and culture, yeah.
Can we just stick religion in there?
You know, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just bringing that up for a point
Yeah.
of discussion.
Right. and
It's
we
sticky
could-
though, because all religions aren't considered races.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I mean, I definitely have a lot of Jewish friends that would argue to the point that it is a race. You know, because it's just a different, more than your belief system, I think.
Well, I don't want to say like hate speech. I don't want to have to define, you know, that, but, and maybe there's another term that can be used to identify inappropriate behavior around, you know, biases that take place in the system that are centered on religion
Yeah.
or, you know.
And I like the fact that when,
Religious
I think
beliefs.
we've obviously made the point here is when you give your report,
Yes.
it'll be a part of the report.
Yes.
And that will be part of the record, that we're recognizing these issues ongoing within our system, and here's how we deal with them.
Yeah. But we do monitor for religion, racism, ethnicity, ethnic harassment. And so however you categorize it, we capture it. And then we're able to break it down to see, is this anti-Semitism? Is this another type of hate or bias that's occurring?
Yeah, and I like that because I think that then also emphasizes the power behind this policy and our focus on these type of things.
In your reporting, so in the reporting that we talk about in this policy, that reporting is done in what way? So is it an actual physical, is it material that's given to the board? Do you do your presentation? How's the board and the public become knowledgeable about this?
So typically, every year is through our KPI reporting. And then when we report on our perceptual survey results, we call out a little bit more specifically some of the things that's associated with this.
Okay.
Are you asking?
Then we also give a report annually through the Racial Equity Committee,
Right.
through a community forum or something specific.
I think what you spoke to earlier is having that.
You're asking for how many reports came in, that sort of point, no?
No, I want language in there that kind of gives the public an
nod.
idea
Okay.
of how it's reported,
Right.
not how it's reported, what is reported and.
That there's a mechanism built into our strategic plan and our consistent KPI reporting.
Correct.
It speaks to all of the outcomes associated with this policy versus saying, we
Right.
direct the superintendent to do this and we direct the
Right.
superintendent to do that.
Right.
Right,
And that, so they're aware of when, you know,
Yes.
it's probably an annual thing. And I know that the Racial Equity Committee comes before us. I would just like to speak to the Racial Equity Committee reporting, and this is really an aside, and I apologize, but this policy doesn't speak to that at all. You know, in the reporting, transparency, and results. Do we want to include that the Racial Equity Committee also does a report, that this is part of that reporting process?
They do a report, don't
They do an annual report, but it is not focused on.
It's not focused just on this, yeah, like they just recently did their report.
Right, and so I'm not,
Focused on this policy.
right, I'm not sure if I would have them to be an authoritative body to report on your policy. I would, however, encourage them to, when they do their annual reporting, how staff has responded to the information that's in the policy and how maybe they have responded to it or what their reactions have been to some of our efforts and work.
Can I ask a clarifying question? What's the history of the Racial Equity Committee, and how would you describe their purpose?
I can tell you that because it started before they.
Because it's a hard question to answer without knowing what the intent
It
is.
started during my first term.
Okay.
And Jay Mason very much, because it went through a whole thing where it became everything to everybody, and then we had to say, well, what's the good of that? So then it was brought back to focusing on one aspect.
But what do they do? And I don't mean that in a patronizing way. Like, what's their authority, or what's their purpose, and what work they're supposed to be pursuing?
Ray is the current liaison. She would be
Okay.
better. I go to the forums, and of course, we're all here for the presentation. They talk, I mean, they've done SOCA. They have a student members also that did a panel. They did a public event.
They have a full set of bylaws, which is
Yes.
Took a long
different,
time for them.
different than most of the committees. They do have a full set of bylaws that outlines their purpose.
There's only two committees that have
So
it.
is their job to keep this conversation at the center of the work that the board does? Is that a fair statement?
I think that would be fair.
That's their missions, that's kind of their mission statement, yes.
Well, and I'll just jump in here, and my understanding was they were supposed to be kind of the boots on the ground in the school system.
Okay.
And that's why I was saying, tying it to this policy, I assumed that that's where that came from, this was a committee that was formed based on this policy.
But it sounds like it started way before.
Yeah,
that.
it was actually the opposite,
But
yeah, the Racial
but
Equity
it
Committee
sounds like
existed
it's the
prior,
opposite.
yes.
So, and I'm not 100% familiar with,
They
yeah,
did
their,
work. I think they
their
did
history,
work.
obviously. But that they are supposed to be bringing to the board recommendations
Yes.
on what we are to be doing as policy leaders
Yes.
in the system to help make corrections or address or also create language that strengthens, the activities that are being done at the curriculum level.
And I just wonder to what extent there might be an opportunity then in this policy to be more clear about the board's intent for that group, so that they have a real clear focus. I don't know how they would be able to get enough information from what you just described to inform policy. Based on the work you just described, I don't know.
Well, we report to them pretty
Right.
much every month.
Right.
In their bylaws, they have very specific areas where they're supposed to be focused and intentional on.
Okay,
And they gather that information through several different ways.
okay.
Their bylaws took a long time.
I know they do surveys, right?
Yes.
They do
They
conduct
do surveys.
So,
They do a public forum. But
I-
yeah, that was a big hang, because people wanted to get going. They're like, no, they have to get the bylaws.
Just a reminder, we have 3 minutes left in our estimated time. policy, an excellence policy, required by COMAR to review that every 3 years. That we have no choice. It's what we do.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Everybody good with that?
Yeah, yeah, I'm okay with that.
So we'll, by consensus, we'll move this back in May. We'll,
Yeah, this will come back to you in May with some red lines, and it may, may be an extensive revision.
Okay.
The form is sort of like our current version. It's closer.
Closer.
The bullets need to go. Bullets do not belong in schools.
so how about our upcoming meeting?
So our next policy committee meeting is January 21st, 2026. We do not have a December policy committee meeting. There are, as of now, 5 policies on the agenda, not necessarily in this order. 505, which is health education. That will be information, discussion, action. 437, bullying, harassment, intimidation. This is one of the last 400 series holdovers. Will be coming back for information, discussion, action, and along with it is 309, discrimination and harassment, employees, applicants, community members. The reason these are both coming back together, if you recall, the discussion was, does this need to be a single 100 series policy instead of 2 separate 400, 300 series policies? So we are going to be working on that, and that will come for information, discussion, action. The remaining 2 are information discussion only, and that is 510 copyright laws and 515 waivers of board policy.
I'm sorry, what was the last one?
515 waivers of board policy.
No, none.
And with that, Mr. Rose, would you like to bang the imaginary gavel?
We have something. Okay, so just following up on anti-bias real quick, just to give you a heads up of what's to come. The Maryland State House passed a bill this year, House Bill 324. Yes, so it says county board members have to complete anti-bias training at least once during a member's term. And so we received some resources from the Maryland State Department of Education. We're finalizing